Welcome back to the Adventure Box Podcast. This is the podcast where we travel to the past like a battlefield correspondent in times of time traveling boots. That's right, we're going to go back to the battlefields and we're going to be there talking about those things. Now, I am your host, Zach Edwards, and today we're stepping back into history, strapping on our kepis, grabbing our bayonets, and hopping into a world's loudest steam engine because we're heading into the early years of the United States and the U.S. Civil War. So there's always three things we talk about. Today we're going to be talking about the early battles and what not to do in a war. That's right. This is the to-dos and do-not-dos in war. The second thing is the moment when Lincoln changes the war purpose forever. And the last one, what really was happening in the West during this time and how the Western expansion and the railroads didn't just survive the war, they thrived because of the war and during the war. These are all amazing, this is all amazing information to learn about. So let's go from Bull Run to Antietam. From ironclad, the ships, to emancipation. It's all happening in today's episode. So tighten up and let's get going. Keep your listening ear out. You're going to be hearing some tips that you might want to hear and need to hear so we don't repeat the past. So here we go. Let's talk about some of the early battles. Now, already, it's 1861. The war had just begun. Spirits are high. Uniforms are still colorful and clean, and on both sides are very confident that they're going to win. Now, spoiler alert, there's only ever one winner, and they have no idea what's going to come to get there. Okay, first off, first battle. What was the first battle in the Civil War? It was called Bull Run. It was on July 21st, 1861. Location, Virginia. Okay, so not a battle in the South. No, it was not a battle in the North. It was a battle in the South. Union General. His name was Irvin McDowell. On the Confederate side, you had a few people. You had P.G.T. Beauregard. There you go, Beauregard. P.G.T. Beauregard. Yes, that's a real name. And Joseph Johnston. Now, there's a special guest. That's right, I got a special star here. His name was Stonewall Jackson. Now, at the time, he was not Stonewall, but he became Stonewall. We'll get into that in just a second. So the Union thought this was going to be a one-day picnic victory. They came into Virginia thinking they were going to be able to take it over. Literally, people brought baskets and opera glasses to watch. They were up on the hillside. They were watching down, eating food while the battle was going on, while people were freaking dying. What's wrong with these people? They were wrong too, because the Confederates rallied, thanks to someone by the name of Thomas Stonewall Jackson, who stood firm like, Stonewall. That's how he got his name. He was firm during this battle, which gave him the name. He actually had done that in the past. People knew him for being a Stonewall. Now, the Unions, the troops, panicked. The civilians ran. Horses screamed out of there. And it was complete and utter chaos. The North suddenly realized, this war is going to be long. This war is going to be deadly. I don't know if we know what we're doing here. So, that was the first battle. Unions, not so lucky. Confederates win. Okay. Then you have the Peninsula Campaign. This is around the spring and summer of the next year, 1862. Union General George B. McClellan. Now, he was cautious, he was dramatic, and constantly writing letters to Lincoln about how he doesn't have enough troops. Even when he does have enough troops, he keeps asking for more. The goal in this campaign was to march up the peninsula in Virginia, Virginia's peninsula, and take Richmond, the Confederates' capital. So why in the world would the Confederates' capital be so close to the border? Well, look at it on the Union side. Where was our capital? Where was the North's capital? I can't say ours. Where was the North's capital? The North's capital was in D.C., which was right over the border of Virginia. They were both right there. But so were their troops. They had plenty of troops in those areas. And, like the other one, they might have thought it was going to be more of a picnic, but it wasn't. The campaign was slow. It was muddy. And it was full of missed opportunities. McClellan kept hesitating. With Confederate General Robert E. Lee, which was one of the head generals, he said, "Cool, I'll take the initiative." The end result, the Union failed to take Richmond, McClellan got benched, and the South gained more momentum. 2 strikes for the Union, 2 wins for the Confederates. But it's all going to change. Now, out in the ocean, you have 2 ships that come out. One, the Monitor, versus the Merrimack. Now, this is where we get to say hello to the Iron Chef. This is the naval edition. The CSS, the Confederate States ships, Confederate States of Virginia. This is the CSS Virginia, was rebuilt from the USS Merrimack that they had taken and revamped it. It looks like a floating barn with cannons and armor. Now, on the other side, you have the USS Monitor, looking like a giant metal mushroom capped with a spinning turret. That's right. So it's really interesting to think about or look in your mind's eye. But these 2 ironclads, no, that's something we need to talk about. Ironclad, it wasn't that they put iron. At the time, it wasn't iron. Well, actually at that point it was iron, but it was when they were transitioning from copper, which is what they used in the War of 1812. The copper, the idea of copper went back to the late American Revolution, early War of 1812, when they wrapped copper on the outside of the ship's hull. Well, it wasn't as strong as iron, so they replaced the iron on top of the wood of the ships, of the naval ships. Because they did this, cannonballs literally bounced off like Nerf darts on a fridge. That's right. They didn't go through the ships anymore. They hit the side of the and ricocheted off. So who won? Technically, it was a draw, but symbolically, a huge deal. The era of wooden warships had ended. And this is the great thing. The industrial North had a lot more metal. It had a lot more industry to be able to do that. Down in the South, they had just started using it. And the Navy warfare would never be the same because of it. So, the takeaway from 1861 to 1862, the war was realized. It was going to be longer, it was going to be bloodier, and more advanced than anyone imagined. And neither side had figured that out just yet. So, let's go to part 2. This is a few other ones. This is the silo, Antietam, and we will talk about it, the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, so by 1862, the war was escalating like a group project going wrong. More battles, more soldiers, more deaths, and more at stake. So Battle of Shiloh, very important. You need to learn about these 2, Shiloh and Antietam. Okay, Shiloh, location, Tennessee. This is where Ulysses S. Grant really came into play. He was the Union officer. On the Confederate side, you have General Albert Sidney Johnston. He basically died mid-battle. At dawn, the Confederate troops surprised the Union camp. Grant rallies, reinforcements arrive, and by day 2, the Union drive the Confederates back. Casualty, 23,000 soldiers dead. This was the bloodiest battle in American history at this point, and it showed that this war wasn't going to be heroic, it was going to be brutal. Now, I will tell you this, the reason why these are so important at the very end. Battle of Antietam. Now, if I didn't mention it, the first one was April 6th through 7th of 1862, so 2 days. The next one, Battle of Antietam, September 17th. This is like what, 5 months between, 4 months between of the same year. Okay, this is location Maryland. Remember, Maryland is technically a free state. It is technically northern, and it is technically right around the area that the capital is, the Union capital. So you had McClellan for the Unions, and the Confederates had Lee, General Lee. Fun fact though, so the Union troops found Lee's battle plans wrapped around cigars. Did McClellan move quickly? Of course not. It's what was his issue the last time. That's why he was benched. He hesitated again. Classic McClellan. Still, Antietam became the bloodiest single day in U.S. history with another 23,000 casualties in a single day. Remember, the other one was 23,000 casualties in 2 days. This is all in 1 day. Strategically, it was a draw. Politically, it was a huge win for Lincoln because the South could not come into the North, and this was the one where they wanted to be able to get into the North. And now here's the thing. This actually drew. This is what Lincoln needed in order to do something huge for the whole country, huge for history, for everything. Because now Lincoln had enough of a victory to drop the hammer. He was ready. But what was he going to drop? An announcement. It was announced September 22nd, 1862. September 22nd. That was what? 5 days after Battle of Antietam. He made it effective January 1st, 1863. But, again, the announcement, September 22nd, 1862. What happened? I mentioned it one time already in this, but I did it very quickly. What happened? Lincoln says, all enslaved people in Confederate territories are now free. He dropped the hammer on what's called the Emancipation Proclamation. He made a proclamation of emancipation. Emancipation basically means freedom for all those that are enslaved. So, did it free all slaves? No. Only those basically in the rebel states, not the border states. Why did he do that? Because he wanted to give the slaves the ability to run or to abandon the South. 2, he wanted to show that the North had power to do those things. And he said, all slavery is now gone. Again, it became effective January 1st, 1863, because there's things they had to do to make sure that it would stay in place. So, again, did it free all slaves? No. Just in the rebel states, not the border states as of yet. As of yet. But it changed the war's purpose. Now, it wasn't about the preservation of the Union. It was about ending slavery. This is when it literally became about ending slavery. It also allowed black men to enlist, and thousands did. Tens of thousands did in the North. It crushed Confederate hopes for foreign support as well, and added moral firepower to the Union cause. This is why it was so important. Blacks could now join the army. They were more men that the North needed to attack the South in order to free all slaves. So, that crushed the Confederate hopes. It was done for. And this foreign support, oh, it was still coming in. It was still coming in. So, I'm going to tell you a side story. This is in the text, but I wasn't going to be talking about it today. Have you ever heard of the day Cinco de Mayo? Cinco de Mayo. You think of it, oh, it's a Mexican holiday. Actually, it's not. It's not celebrated in Mexico, per se, not the same way. It's actually an American holiday. What? American holiday? Yeah, it's an American holiday. It's celebrated by the Mexico a little bit as well. But the reason why it's so big here, or it should be so big here, and everyone should support it to some extent, it's not about Mexican independence. Even though they fought France and kept France out of coming up and taking over Mexico. Now, back up a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit about this story. So you have France ran by the reign of Napoleon, Emperor Napoleon. Now, Napoleon is trying to gather as much land as possible. Now, they were working with Mexico, even though Mexico had taken out Spain. Well, they were getting into a lot of debt, and they said, we can't pay for it. Well, this is when France, Britain, and Spain, France, Spain, and Britain, I think it was Britain, yeah, they all came over to Mexico in their ships and started releasing their troops onto Mexican soil. Well, the Mexicans were not happy at this. Well, neither were Britain and also Spain. Because come to find out, Napoleon wanted to take all the land. British and Spanish, they just wanted their money. So, when they found out what Napoleon was trying to do, they said, we're done. We're out of here. They took their ships and went home. They just picked up and left. Napoleon wasn't done. He says, I'm taking Mexico. So he goes and attacks the first city. That city stayed firm, and they were not able to take them over. Because they were not able to take them over, it stopped Napoleon from supporting the South. Napoleon was planning to help the South if they got Mexico. But because Mexico actually stood up to France and Napoleon, they had to walk away. Napoleon actually did take over Mexico City, and later on the United States would help support, Lincoln would help support Mexico to push out France. But if they had taken that first city, the rest of Mexico most likely would have fallen quickly. But because they couldn't, it took them a while to take over Mexico City, and by that point they didn't have the supplies and everything to support the Confederates. So, Cinco de Mayo, I am so grateful for that day, because that represents the day that the French were not able to support the South and win the Civil War. So, thanks to that. Okay, so let's go to another one. So, from Silo's trenches, you have to Antioch's cornfields. It went to a promise of freedom, of emancipation because of Silo, and then because of Antietam. Lincoln needed a win. He needed something to push the troops, to give them morale and get them ready to go. Because as soon as emancipation was announced, you'd have all of the South furious with Lincoln and the Union and wanting to destroy it. So this war was transformed into something bigger than just territories. It was becoming a war for the soul of the nation. Okay, so let's go into something that's a little off topic, but not. The railroads and the westward expansion during the war. These are essential things to learn about because it basically was what held everything together. So, you have, while the cannonballs are still flying in the east, the trains were still rolling in the west. Now, while the cannonballs were still flying, you had the North coming down and destroying the train tracks as much as possible. The North had plenty of trains, plenty of train tracks, and plenty of ways to transport things. The South, not so much. They were trying to keep their railroads very safe. But in the West, what was happening in the West? They weren't exactly at war. They were trying to grow. So yes, they were at war because they were part of the United States, but no, somehow the U.S. would find time to build a transcontinental railroad during the Civil War. Now, this all came from actually the Congress. There was an act that was passed. Lincoln signed it into law. It was called the Pacific Railroad Act of 1862. While cannonballs are still flying, the Congress is still passing things. Why can't we pass? It's peacetime and we can't even pass anything in our Congress. What's up with that? Okay, so because nothing says multitasking by like trying to hold together two different parts of the country, they were also building railroads across the country going west. Two companies got the job. So building west from Nebraska, you had Union Pacific. They were building the tracks going towards California. Central Pacific were building east from California towards Nebraska, towards the Union Pacific. Workers include Civil War veterans, those that could not fight anymore. They came out to build the railroads. You had immigrants, especially those from China, or freemen. That's right. When people were free because of the emancipation, they came over and started working on the railroad if they weren't fighting in the war. There was a huge number of, formerly enslaved, but also Chinese labor. Why was the railroad so important? Everything. The railroad was everything to life. It's like what we have with airplanes and semi-trucks and any kind of ship. It was basically all built on the back of railroad at this time. There were still ships going around, but they needed a fast track over to New York, or over to California and back to New York. And if they could do that, it means instead of taking months to go around the Cape, the trains could go west and it'd literally take them 5 to 6, maybe a week worth of time. 6 to 10 days, we'll just say. So, okay. Now, why were they so important? Why was the railroad so important? You had military logistics, moving troops and supplies. Now, that wasn't much of the West. That was down in the South. But again, all railroads, why were they important? Economic survival. It connected the East and the West. Or it connected the whole North together. But it was also a symbolic unity. A literal steel spine holding the country together. That's what made the railroads so important at the time. And as the war raged, you also had another act that was going through Congress. It's not about the railroads. It's called the Homestead Act. It basically gave land to settlers for westward expansion. And so westward expansion continued to move. Towns popped up everywhere. Territories applied for statehood. You literally had people waiting at a line for a gunfire. They ride off and stake their claim of where their land was and get it for free. So imagine that. Now, also, imagine being on a train. You're in Nevada. You know where that is? It's right next to it. It's between Utah and California. You're reading the headlines like Battle of Antietam, 23,000 dead. And think, so should I still start that ranch that I wanted to start? Yep. Americans always looking forward. They continue to move forward. Even though there's war going on. Even though the railroad tracks are being staged. People are still moving. Now it's interesting that they wouldn't actually go into the battle and start fighting with all those people that were dying. Maybe if we had more support there, there'd be less people dying. But who knows? So, without assuming we know what they're thinking, maybe there's actual reasons why they didn't go fight. I'll tell you one. Religious freedom. Now, some religions don't like violence. We're not even talking about India with their non-violence covenants that they make. No, we're talking about people that do not want it because they are Christian, peaceful people. Well, you have to think, what would have happened if more of those people that instead of going out for farms of their own, or instead of Congress saying, hey, we'll give you free land if you go out west, that somewhat brings people away from going to the war, they were doing two things at the same time. And ultimately we know that it won, but would it have won? Maybe more people from the north decided we're not going to go fight in the battles, we're going to go plot ourselves some land. What would have happened? So that's it for today. Let's do some reflections, some closing reflections. Okay, first off, what did we see today? We saw a picnic at Bull Run turning into a bloodbath. Remember, they were on this hillside, the civilians watching this battle in the distance, watching people shoot each other. not exactly the entertainment I want. Except, I mean, what do we watch today? We watch Hunger Games. Yeah, kids killing kids. We watch horror flicks. One person killing a group of people. I mean, seriously, I wouldn't put it past them to make a picnic and watch a battle where people are being shot in the head. What is up with us? Okay, I digress. Okay, we had iron ships clashing. And generals with impressive beards. Oh yeah, you got to check out some of the pictures. I should have brought them up. All of them had beards. One thing, it was easier not to have to trim them every day or shave every day. Because you might be in battle for 2 days. What are you going to do? Take out your razor in the middle of a battle? No. So they just grew it out. There's no real need. The war's purpose also changed during this time. Remember, went from saving a union to ending slavery. This is why it was so important. And in the background, the country was laying down railroads and people were settling new lands all during this time. What would you think the Union soldiers or even Confederate soldiers thought? I was like, wait a second. They're giving away free land. I can't get free land. I'm out here shooting my neighbor. How is that fair? But yet they still expanded. And all those people were able to get land. Man, it's interesting what they were doing during the Civil War. The Civil War wasn't just about fighting. It was about transformation, military morale, and geographical morale as well, or geographical accomplishments as well. But that's it. That's all I got for you today. So thank you for marching with me through musket fire and muddy trenches and train tracks. Today on the Adventure Box Podcast, I am Zach Edwards, your historical hype man, reminding you that the Civil War wasn't just about winning. It was about the country and what it was to become. Next time, we will talk about so much more of the Civil War. I hope you're enjoying this. Please put your comments below. Give me some reviews. Ask us some questions. We'd love to answer them. Try to stump the spokesperson. Give us some questions you might not know or not think that we could actually answer. Until next time, again, today's Wednesday, so we will see you on Monday or Thursday if you want to learn about ancient history. We're going into India, I think. So I hope you enjoy this. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.